Prepare for an economic collapse. Dajjalic dollar cannot be trusted. Do not trust the Dajjalic dollar.
A sudden dollar collapse would create global economic turmoil. Investors would rush to other currencies such as the euro or other assets such as gold and commodities. Demand for treasuries would plummet and interest rates would rise. US imports prices would skyrocket, causing inflation. The United States exports would be dirt cheap, giving the economy a brief boost. But in the long run, inflation, high interest rates, and volatility would strangle possible business growth. Unemployment would worsen, sending the United States back into recession, or even worse,
the leaders of the Eurozone's four biggest economies are meeting in Rome, with the Italian Prime Minister Mario Monti saying there's 1 week left to save the Eurozone. But after years of failing to deal with the crisis, is 1 week enough to perform some kind of rescue? A miracle, maybe?
Well, how many times are we going to hear this hijacking scenario where some technocrat like Mario Monti puts a gun to the people's head and say, either give us all your money or we're going to take all your assets. They're going to do it anyway. So why not form some kind of resistance against this global occupation by bankers? You know, the people have to stand up and realize that no one's going to help them but themselves. They need to push out the kleptocrats and the banking terrorists, as I call them, and stand up for themselves. Until they do something for themselves, no one's going to do anything for them.
Well, thank you very much there. Max Kaiser, economic expert and host of the Kaiser Report here on RT. Thanks for talking to us.
India actually has already bought Iranian oil using gold instead of US dollars. And this is extremely significant because every year India actually spends 12 billion US dollars on Iranian oil. And now actually Beijing is also saying that it might want to jump on board with New Delhi and also look into some sort of agreement with Iran to continue to get oil. New Delhi and Beijing actually account for 40% of the imports of Iranian oil. The EU only counts for 20%. Obviously, we've been talking about all week about this oil embargo that the EU announced on Monday that they're hoping to roll out and put into place by July 1st. And obviously, if New Delhi and Beijing find a way to continue trading with Iran using gold instead of US dollars, this would severely hurt what the European Union and Washington is trying to do. Russia has also said that it wants to continue trading with Iran using domestic currencies instead of US dollars. Obviously, the point of the EU oil embargo would be to bring Iran back to the negotiations table over its nuclear program. Obviously, Iran has said consistently maintained that this is a peaceful nuclear program. The West believes that they are potentially developing nuclear weapons. So in response to the EU's announcement on Monday that it will place an oil embargo on Iran, Iran has said that it's going to shut the Strait of Hormuz, which is actually where 20 to 30% of the world's oil supply shuttles through. And the United States has said it will absolutely not allow that to happen, even sort of alluding to the fact that it could potentially use military force to make sure that that strait stays open. Moscow has also said that sanctions are an obsolete form of sort of punishing a country and that it's actually going to be counterproductive. Another interesting thing to note here is that if Beijing and New Delhi continue to trade with Iran with gold, it's actually going to increase the value of gold and decrease the value of the US dollar as the global reserve currency.
A day after Hillary Clinton declared that China appeared to be curbing oil purchases from Iran, new figures show that its imports have actually risen by 35% since just last month. Beijing is now even urging Iran to sell the excess oil it's accumulated as a result of sanctions and lost exports to Europe.
India is in talks with 14 other countries to use Iranian highways, railroads, and ports to connect it to parts of Central Asia and Europe in half the time it currently takes.
If you are going to have a trading relationship, an economic relationship, or any kind of relationship with the countries of Central Asia, this is the only way. And we have been helping in building not only a road network, but we even trying a rail network to link up through Iranian ports into Central Asia.
Let's look at other aspects of Western sanctions on Iran. In that, shipping companies have been forced to pull the insurance for Iranian tankers. How's Iran going to get its oil to any potential future buyers if it's having these sort of problems?
Well, there are minor problems. Other arrangements can be made. The Western insurance companies are not the end-all of it.
It is in the vital interests of all of us to ensure that Afghanistan is linked to the world through communication means that cannot be disrupted at will, that it has an ability to export its resources and therefore make some money.
Now, the US is reportedly threatening India with penalties if it doesn't comply with Washington's sanctions against Iran. India is one of the biggest consumers of Iranian oil, and American officials are quoted as saying they're worried that India may sidestep payment restrictions. Well, RT's Priya Sridhar is in New Delhi for us now. Priya, is this something that India should be worried about at all?
Well, Kerry, it's something that people here are certainly talking about. India, as you mentioned, is one of the biggest customers of Iranian oil. India is actually the number 3 buyer of Iranian oil behind China and Japan. Iran is obviously one of the biggest exporters of Iranian oil in the world. And so far, Indian officials have refused to stop buying Iranian oil, which Washington has clearly been very angry about. Some top U.S. State Department officials in the past couple of weeks have said that this was a slap in the face to them. They really want India to get on board with the oil embargo that Washington and the EU has put in place.
Now, the leaders of the Eurozone's 4 biggest economies are meeting in Rome, with the Italian Prime Minister Mario Monti saying there's 1 week left to save the Eurozone. But after years of failing to deal with the crisis, is 1 week enough to perform some kind of rescue? A miracle, maybe?
How many times are we going to hear this hijacking scenario where some technocrat like Mario Monti puts a gun to the people's head and say, either give us all your money or we're going to take all your assets. They're going to do it anyway. So why not form some kind of resistance against this global occupation by bankers? You know, the people have to stand up and realize that no one's going to help them but themselves. They need to push out the kleptocrats and the banking terrorists, as I call them, and stand up for themselves. Until they do something for themselves, no one's going to do anything for them.
Well, thank you very much there. Max Kaiser, economic expert and host of the Kaiser Report here on RT. Thanks for talking to us.
The Indian foreign minister has said that while India has followed UN sanctions in the past, there is nothing that actually binds them to follow them. Another big point that many Indian officials here are sort of looking at is that the new U.S. law doesn't specify what percentage a nation must reduce its import to qualify it from exemptions from the sanctions. So right now there have been reports surfacing that Obama could impose penalties on India as early as June 28th if India refuses to stop buying Iranian oil. In the past few weeks, they've been saying that to circumvent these sanctions, they might actually use gold instead of dollars to continue buying the oil. And obviously, both India and China are major customers of Iranian oil. And many analysts here in India are saying that sanctions simply won't work if India and China don't get on board.
The timing makes no difference because starting in 2007, 2008, you had what's called in economics a Minsky moment, where the global indebtedness reached a critical amount of no amount of stimulus or any kind of policy changes would change the fact that the globe is embarking on this massive global deleveraging, which is going to end in massive defaults in banks across Europe and across the world. These major banks in Europe are technically insolvent. Deutsche Bank is insolvent. BNP is insolvent. Societe Generale is insolvent. JP Morgan, insolvent. And of course, Lloyd Blankfein, who's here at the conference in St. Petersburg, his bank, Goldman Sachs, is also insolvent.
A dollar collapse would create global economic turmoil. And to respond to this kind of uncertainty, you must be mobile. Keep your assets liquid so you can shift them as needed. Make sure your job skills are transferable. Update your passport in case things get so bad in the long run so you can move out of the country. These are just a few possible things to protect yourself and to survive a dollar collapse.